Okay, let's start with a question. What if dominating other people? What if it doesn't just hurt the person being oppressed?
What if it damages the oppressor, too?
Exactly. What if wielding that kind of power, to control and coerce actually eats away at your own soul?
It's a challenging thought.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're your shortcut to being truly well-informed. And today, we're diving into this really fascinating article. It's called The Corrosive Soul of Political Authority.
And it's not just history. It uses history, sure, but it's more a critique, a really deep reflection.
Right. It uses these powerful historical examples like slavery, but also talks about the author's own experiences,
Yeah.
all to explore how systems of domination,
Whether that's old school slavery or modern state power.
how these systems can fundamentally corrupt, well, the human psyche. Our mission here is to pull out the key insights, the most important bits, to help you grasp what this really means.
For everyone involved, not just the victim.
Yeah, because the core idea, and it's pretty counterintuitive, is that these systems don't just victimize, they actually radically change the personality of the people enforcing them.
Or even people who just, approve of them.
Yeah.
Who endorse the system.
It's a tough idea, but definitely one worth digging into.
Well, what I found striking was how the author immediately goes after our usual assumptions.
Yeah.
About who really suffers in these power dynamics right from the start.
Absolutely. It kicks off with that Frederick Douglass story from his autobiography.
Oh.
Wow, it is a gut punch.
It really is.
He talks about being enslaved, obviously, and how his master's wife initially started teaching him to read.
And she was kind at first, right? Treated him like a person.
Yeah, exactly, like a human being. But then her husband steps in, warns her that teaching slaves to read makes them, useless.
And that warning just flips the switch in her.
Completely. Douglas describes this total transformation. She becomes cold, domineering, really oppressive. It's this incredibly dramatic, almost, heartbreaking change.
And that's where Douglas drops this bombshell insight, the one the whole article kind of pivots on.
Which is,
That it wasn't just the enslaved people suffering. Slavery, Douglas realized, had destroyed her humanity too.
right. So that's the foundation. Systems of domination harm the dominator's soul.
Maybe even more than the dominated person's body, the article suggests. It really forces you right then to question that whole victim-perpetrator binary.
It definitely does. That first story alone really messes with your assumptions. So, okay, if that's the case for historical slavery, how does the article connect that idea, that soul corrosion, to modern power, to the state?
Well, it draws a pretty direct line to what it calls statism.
Statism meaning.
Basically just the belief that government authority is legitimate, inherently so.
Okay.
And the argument is, once you accept that legal violence, violence sanctioned by the state, is okay, you start this kind of dangerous psychological process.
You mean you start justifying it to yourself?
Pretty much. You reframe domination. You reframe coercion as actually being moral or necessary. It's a big internal shift.
So it's not just passively accepting authority, it's like actively changing your own moral rules. What sort of psychological tricks does the article say people use to make that jump? To see state violence as okay?
It suggests it's a kind of self-defense mechanism, psychologically speaking.
Yeah.
Like the article points to how people sometimes blame victims who resist authority.
Oh, like the example used.
Yeah, the conservatives in comment sections defending police brutality by saying, if you had just complied, that kind of thing.
Right.
And doing that mental gymnastics, it protects you from having to admit you support something that deep down maybe feels wrong or unjust.
But the cost.
A cost, the article argues, is huge. It warps your empathy. It messes with your moral compass. You end up ignoring suffering you might otherwise condemn.
That's sobering, thinking about that internal cost. And it gets even more specific, doesn't it? The article looks closely at the people actually doing the enforcing.
Right. Soldiers, police officers, tax collectors, people whose job is authority.
How does their role speed up this soul corrosion?
Well, the argument is that the job itself, the very nature of it, almost requires them to see other people as, well, beneath them in some way.
Because they have to give orders.
Give orders, often without knowing the full context, punish people who don't comply. It becomes a daily habit, exercising power over other people.
So it's not just what they do, it's the attitudes and traits that get cultivated over time.
Exactly. The article talks about traits like arrogance, even sadism in some cases, and definitely victim blaming becoming more ingrained.
And this doesn't just happening at work, right? The article claims it bleeds into their personal lives.
Yeah, that's one of the most disturbing points. It mentions this daily habit of domination spilling over, and it actually cites the example of higher rates of domestic abuse among law enforcement officers.
Wow.
It really makes you consider the kind of invisible moral damage that might come with those positions of power.
A really chilling potential spillover. And it makes you think about the wider societal impact, too. The article then broadens out, doesn't it? It talks about how whole societies get conditioned.
Yeah, conditioned to accept harm, often just through language.
How so?
Uses historical examples like wartime propaganda, thinking about World War II or Vietnam.
Okay.
Using dehumanizing terms, the article mentions things like Japs, Krauts, or even more recently, terms like illegal aliens,
And the purpose of that language is?
to make cruelty seem okay, to convince people that harming this other group isn't just justified, it's maybe even necessary. It lowers the moral barrier.
So it's like psychological conditioning on a mass scale, turning ordinary people into, well, supporters of things they might normally find horrible.
Precisely. The article says it turns otherwise decent people into cheerleaders for harm.
Cheerleaders for harm.
Yeah. And it makes them, quote, far more vicious than they might have been without authoritarian indoctrination. It really highlights how seemingly small shifts in language, stuff we hear every day, can subtly change how we see morality, how we see other groups of people.
It's a powerful way to achieve moral disengagement, I guess.
Definitely.
And this all becomes incredibly potent when the author shares their own story, their own journey. That adds a real layer of vulnerability.
It really does. The author's quite open about having been a conservative in the past.
Right. And supporting things they now see differently.
Exactly. Supporting things like taxation, military actions, things they now view as fundamentally immoral. And they talk about how hard it was to let go of those beliefs.
That must have been uncomfortable.
Deeply uncomfortable, they say. But this is the key part. They realize it was far less destructive than clinging to them and becoming morally calloused.
Wow. That really emphasizes the courage it takes, doesn't it? To face your own potential complicity and actually change your mind on something so fundamental.
Immense moral courage, yeah.
So, okay, we've covered Douglass, statism, the enforcer role, propaganda, the personal journey. If we try to synthesize all of this, what's the main takeaway, the core insight from this deep dive?
I think the really profound conclusion is that these authoritarian systems, they don't just oppress the victims you can easily see. They fundamentally reshape the personality, the character of everyone tangled up in them.
Making ordinary people crueler.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Crueler than they might otherwise be in a society that wasn't based so much on authority and obedience. And that leads to the author's final, very stark preference.
Which is really something.
Yeah. They say they would rather be a victim of state abuse than an enforcer of it.
Why? What's the reasoning there?
Because losing your money, or even your freedom, the author argues that's actually less devastating than the erosion of one's moral soul. The internal damage is worse than the external.
That is a really powerful, provocative thought to end on. It definitely leaves you with a lot to chew on.
Absolutely.
So the question for you listening is, what does this exploration, this deep dive into the corrosive soul of political authority, what does it mean for your understanding of power, of morality, of the systems we all live in?
And maybe, how does recognizing this corrosive effect change how you see authority? Or even think about your own role within different power structures?
Something to definitely mull over. We'll leave it there for this deep dive.